Hello everyone, greetings from Maastricht. Welcome to the Back to the Basics course of Universitas Foundation, and I'm Oliver, your course tutor. We always say in Universitas that we form leaders with 3 C's. Right? These are leaders with competence, they have the necessary skills and knowledge for the task at hand. They have a stable character, which is forged by virtue, and they have a well-formed conscience, which is built upon their own faith tradition and natural law, which is common to all of us. And how do we achieve this? In Universitas, we provide activities, projects, and programs all geared towards the strengthening of these 3 C's. And Back to the Basics is our foundational course. And so if you wish to be part of our fellowship program, let us do this course together. First of all, let me discuss with you the structure of the entire course. To guide you properly for the entire course, please get hold of a copy of Back to the Basics, Principles and Values for Nation Building. This is the reference book for the entire course. You can see here the plan for the entire course. After today's introduction, we're going to tackle the culture of excellence. And then for session 3, values and virtues. Then science, reason, and faith. For session 5, we're going to tackle depth. And then session 6, sense of mission. And for the last session, we're going to see the idea that the more you share, the more you actually gain. Now for the talk proper, we're going to talk about 3 things. First, we're going to situate leadership in the context of socioeconomic problems in whatever country you may be in. Second, we're going to address the need for formation. And we're going to expound on the idea that the best contribution that you can have in nation building is yourself. And third, we're going to discuss the importance of having a clear purpose in your life and the need to have a mentor to guide you through the entire process of forming yourself as a leader. Before I give you the first point, allow me to give you the background story behind all this. Well, I will not tell you what year. After graduating from college, I was part of the finalist of the 10 outstanding students of the Philippines. And before the awarding ceremonies at Malacanang that year, one of the past presidents of the Rotary Club of Makati Central, one of the organizers of the ceremony, invited me to give them a speech in their youth month, I think, that year. That must be September that year. I was challenged by this gentleman from the Rotary Club to come up with my thoughts on nation building. And I was just fresh out of college that time. And I could not give them a talk on economics, politics, business, or whatever, because they're much better than I when it comes to those things. And so I thought, let me go back to the basics. What are those common things that we should strive for, whether we're young or old, whatever race, color, or creed we may have? I started with a part of the speech, and I can read it for you right now. In that speech, we said, we express our fortune of being part of a democratic government working at its best to make our country a globally competitive nation. However, we're aware of the socio-economic and political problems besetting our country, like poverty, threats to peace and security, injustice, ignorance, and destruction of our environment. And in the analysis of these problems, we were united in the realization that their common root is the seeping moral decadence in our society. And the real crisis that we have is not the crisis brought about by these social ills plaguing our country, but in the ultimate sense, a moral crisis. That is the first point that I would like to bring up with you today, that at the bottom of all the social ills that we may encounter in our lives, in our societies, right, is a moral crisis, right? How are we going to illustrate that, for example? You know that, for example, the problem of graft and corruption in society, or the breakdown of families, pornography, prostitution, corporate greed. In my master's here, we call it corporate crime, right? Or tyranny or dictatorship, right? And if you're going to look at these problems, you can see that there's something that is lacking. There's a moral crisis behind it, right? For example, for graft and corruption, there's a question of honesty, of integrity, right? How about breakdown of families? There's a problem of fidelity, actually, or loyalty. Pornography, prostitution, it's a question of chastity, of purity, right? When there's corporate crime committed by these big corporations, for example, actually it's a problem of solidarity in society, right? And if there's tyranny and dictatorship, it's actually a problem of subsidiarity. The government is not able to trust the ability of the different social groups to work together with the government in working for the common good of society. And so if we want to solve the socio-economic problems that we face, we have to go to the root of the matter. We need radical solutions to the problem. Radical comes from the Latin radix, which means root. We have to uproot the problem so that it gets solved. What do I mean? I give you an analogy. Have you ever tried cutting grass? You know that if you just cut grass from the surface, after a few weeks it grows again. But if you want to make sure it doesn't grow again, you have to uproot it. You have to dig the ground and then uproot the grass so that it doesn't grow again. If we want to solve the socio-economic problems, we have to go to the root of the matter. And as we have seen, these social ills that plague our country perpetuate themselves because of a lack of moral foundation. And that brings me to the second point of this talk. What is your basic contribution to nation building? Well, to put it simply, yourself. Because in practical terms, you may not have anything much to offer at this time in your lives. But you should not stop there. That self, if it has to contribute to the well-being of our nation, has to be formed in the right way. Since we're talking about nation building, the building blocks of a nation are actually its people. We have seen in the first point that moral foundation is necessary in building a nation, in addressing the socio-economic ills plaguing our country at their very root. Then each member of society, each building block has to have a good moral foundation. That is why we speak about the need for formation. We're going to tackle that later in pages 116 to 119 of Back to the Basics. But before that, I want to emphasize that unless we are properly formed, we could not expect to contribute effectively to nation building. Just look at juvenile delinquencies. And so before we fight those social ills that plague our country, we have to start fighting with ourselves. That's why the main challenge of this book is this. Before we dream of changing the world, we have to start changing ourselves. We have to undergo serious formation. Because in the end, we can say that even those social ills may be traced back or may be traced from a lack of formation of the people who caused them. Because, there are two possibilities here. It's either we undergo the necessary formation to help build our nation, or we become a menace, or perhaps just a little problem in our society. It's just like becoming wine or vinegar. You know that those two products have similar raw materials, but depending on the process that they undergo, one becomes wine and the other vinegar. Yes, the process is important, which includes the physical and the moral environment where one grows. It may happen that wine at a certain point also becomes vinegar. That's why you have to be vigilant. You have to be always concerned about your formation. You can never say at one point that, it's enough. I'm done. I'm a perfect person. No, because if you stop, you might turn sour one day. You might become vinegar. Well, in the natural course of things, vinegar doesn't become wine, although wine can become vinegar. Since we are human beings, we're not wine or vinegar. It's just an analogy. An analogy is something that's partly the same and partly different. when it comes to human beings, people can always change. Even if you may say that you have turned sour, you have become vinegar, you can always become wine again. It may be more difficult because you already have acquired some bad habits, but you can always change. In Universitas, we believe in the capacity of people to change. That leads me to the article on the need for reformation, page 116 of the book. You may stop here and read it first if you haven't read it yet. In that article, Joubert, in a very artistic way, explained formation as a process of bringing out the best in each one. He used the analogy of a stone, an ore, that is taken from a mine site. A stone that is dark, rough, and imperfect, and it could pass off for any other stone, except that when you know that it came from a mine site, he said, you would think twice before you throw it away. And it could be a precious stone, he said, for all we know, but not after going through a process where the ore is subjected to extreme pressure. And only after undergoing that extreme pressure will one find that the dark, rough, and imperfect stone that one could have thrown away is a sparkling diamond, precious than all the other stones. And he emphasized the role of the miner who noticed the stone, the miner who took time to look closer into the stone and found a diamond in it. And he said that perhaps we are that stone that needs to be polished, waiting for the right person to take us out of the dark. And like any precious stone, there's always something in us that needs to be chipped off before we finally turn out to become better individuals. It is true that we're imperfect, given that we're humans, but we are perfectible. That's why we need formation, right? We need to train ourselves, to educate ourselves, all for the good of our future. And he said it is really an investment, knowing that what we do today can affect us in the years to come. And any wrong move now could cost us a lot one day. But if we sow some good seeds now, we can hope to harvest better fruits tomorrow. I'm reading from the text. And he said that, formation is not an easy thing. It demands a lot. From the time we commit ourselves to every single moment, we live up to that commitment. But if you look at the entire process, it may be difficult. But if we know in the end that it's going to bring out the best in us, it's like bring out the diamond from the ore, then we won't mind the difficulties. We won't mind the entire process. For example, your goal is to become a doctor or a lawyer or a chief executive officer of a company. You cannot just say, "Oh, I want to be a doctor," and then you don't do anything. No, you have to study. You know that. You have to burn the midnight oil, so they say. You have to do everything you can in order to pursue that goal. But in the process of doing that, you don't really mind the sacrifices. I still remember law school is so hard, and it's one of the most difficult things that you can do in your life. One of our professors was telling us on our first year that if you want to give yourself a hard time, there are other ways to do that. It's like, don't torture yourself in law school. But we didn't mind. We didn't mind the sleepless nights. We didn't mind, missing many parties, perhaps, many of the excitements, perhaps, that people of our age were enjoying while we're studying, because we have an exam, we have a recitation the next day, or we have the bar exams for an entire month, right? Studying for several months before that, because we have that goal. Well, that leads me to the third point, right? If you keep the end in mind, Scripture says you will not sin, right? I think Stephen Covey even used that, but it's not original. I think the way he put it is start with the end in mind, right? That has been
developed by people before, but he was able to put it in a very nice way in his 7 habits. Of course, we know in the end, God is our end, but we're going to discuss that in session 4. But it is our end that dictates the means and direction of our entire life. And if it is clear, life is simple. It is very easy for us to decide on anything, no matter how small, because it's just a question of asking ourselves, will this decision bring me to the fulfillment of my ultimate end? Perhaps you have to finish elementary school, high school, college, land on a job, get married, or answer a vocation, a calling from God. But those are small little ends that we have to accomplish, but we know they're good if they are in keeping with our ultimate end, right? And why is that important? It is important because a little diversion now from one's end when one is young may not be noticeable, but if you project that diversion for several years, it would mean going astray. It was a little diversion that turned into a habit, then into a lifestyle, up to such a point that you don't notice anymore that you are going too far from your end. It's just like something that is meant to be wine, but it has turned into vinegar. You will understand that more clearly as we go along in this course. And so, if our end is clear, then the 5 P's of our life are also clear. The first P is the person. That person uses all his passions and peso to pursue his purpose. And in pursuing that purpose, he develops a plan, right? And all those things are dictated by the end, the ultimate end. And because of that, that person understands the need to undergo formation, serious formation. Because as you may have seen by now, that schooling is not enough, education is not enough. Formation really matters, right? In schooling, we develop skills. For example, we become experts into something. With education, we develop knowledge. We become professionals, right? But with formation, we develop virtues. Of course, we also develop virtues in schooling and education. But with formation, we put them all together. They are integrated into our lives, right? They develop our character, and our lifestyle. And this formation never ends because we know that we can always learn more. There's always room for improvement. I heard when I was young, the greatest room in this world is the room for improvement. And if you know that, then you don't mind doing sacrifices for it. Actually, sacrifice comes from 2 Latin words, sacrum and facere. Sacrum means holy, and facere means to make. And so when we sacrifice ourselves, we make that thing we sacrifice for holy, and we make ourselves holy as well, and the people to whom we do it. Imagine each one of us in society trying to sacrifice ourselves, trying to be better, trying to build our lives, trying to form ourselves, and this formation never ends until we die. Imagine what society we're going to have. And that is the challenge that Universitas gives you on a personal level. That is why part of this formation that we give is to provide you with mentors. Remember when we're talking about the ore, there's a special role that was played by the miner. The miner who saw the diamond inside that ore, that diamond in the rough. And so, as I told you earlier, in Universitas, we believe in the capacity of people to change, the capacity of people to become leaders, to be great contributors to the growth and development of our society. So if you don't have any mentor yet, please let us know. Please approach our mentoring director. If you are a fellow of the UFP program, then you will be provided a mentor automatically. As we end, I would like to remind everyone that in Universitas, when you undergo formation, you are expected to share what you have learned to other people. When you attend our talks or our courses, we give them to you in such a way that you can give them yourselves. That's why for Back to the Basics, we follow a structure. Well, there's a 3-point structure that we follow. First, you do an introduction. That is very personal to you, personal to the speaker. You can use current events or anything that can connect you to your target audience. Then you go to the body of your talk. The body usually is composed of 3 topics. You can have more, but usually we try to limit them to 3 ideas so that your audience doesn't get information overload. And then you end with your key takeaways for your talk. If you were observing for this talk, I tried to follow that structure. At the introduction, I spoke to you about how everything started with that speech at the Rotary Club in Makati Central after the TOSP event. And then I talk about 3 key topics. Let me summarize them for you before we end. The first point is that at the bottom of the social ills that plague our country is a moral crisis. And for the second point, if we want to contribute to the building of the nation, then we have to form ourselves. Because the best contribution that we could have in nation building is a well-formed self that is with good moral foundation in order to address the problem that we saw on the first point. And then we spoke about keeping the end in mind, because if we know the end, we will not fall. For that, we advise you to get a good mentor who will help you discover the truth about yourself. Your mentor, in a way, help you customize the formation that we give you in Universitas. Because now, for example, all of you attend these talks, but each one has his or her own personal needs. And so your mentor helps you to personalize it, to customize it in a sense, so that it could be very effective. It addresses your personal needs, and it helps you discover in a personal way your contribution to nation building.
That's about it. I hope you enjoyed the introduction and see you in session 2. Dag!